Hello, my name is John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, the capital of Northern British Columbia. Now, for those guests from around the world that wonder where British Columbia is, obviously it's a province in Canada. It is the western side of Canada. It's a beautiful province, a big province, about 500. Our location is exactly in the center, 500 miles north of Vancouver. And then another 500 miles further would be the Yukon border, right next to Alaska. And then it's also east to west, 500 miles from Prince Rupert and 500 miles from the Alaska border. So today, a very, very interesting guest and a special guest, and I'm really looking forward to our podcast today, Kevin Palmieri. Welcome to the show.
John, thank you so very much for having me. I appreciate it. Excited to chat and see where we end up.
So I kind of looked at your bio a little bit, and you're the CFO and co-founder of the Next Level University. Tell me a little bit about that. Interesting title. When I saw that, I said, "Oh, that right away draws my attention." Obviously, that's the whole objective.
That's one of the goals, yeah. So Next Level University is a global top 100 podcast. We have 1,450 some odd episodes as of today. And below that, we've been very grateful to be able to actually build a business. So we have a bunch of different business offerings. But really what it is, it's a podcast, it's a community, it's a movement, and it is a business. And the interesting thing, John, we used to be called the Hyper Conscious Podcast.
Okay.
And one of our mentors said, nobody knows what that means. So
right.
We should probably rebrand. Then we ended up coming up with Next Level University.
Yeah, a good choice, and for all those reasons. Now, the other thing that I thought was interesting about you individually, so in your mid-20s, you had it all. Everything that you could possibly wish for. Good career, beautiful girlfriend, all of that stuff, a beautiful car, and you had it made, but you didn't think so. And you found yourself at a deep point in your life where you're not sure if continuing was the right thing to do. Tell us about that, because that's very, very life-changing in a way, because the options of going the one direction versus the other are very, very distinct. And obviously, tell us, how did you get there? What happened? What turned it around for you? And obviously from there, the rest is history, and we'll talk about that a lot, right?
Yeah. I often say that I shouldn't be where I am. And a lot of people laugh and they say, no. But for context, if you look at my past, I was raised by my mom and my grandmother. I didn't know my dad. I didn't meet my dad until I was 27. Definitely lower middle class growing up. In high school, I decided I didn't want to go to college. I knew pretty early, I'm not going to college. I'm not interested. So all my friends went off to college and I stayed back, and I was pumping gas for a living. And I was a personal trainer, and I was a truck driver, and I was a forklift operator and in construction. And I did many, many different things trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. But the future did not seem super bright for me when I was that age. I ended up getting this unique opportunity in an industry called weatherization. So it was our job to go into buildings, usually large ones, and make them more energy efficient.
Oh, okay.
I went, a decent job, and it was different. And I went from making $15 an hour to anywhere from $60 to $120 an hour.
Right.
Because we were working on state and government contracts. So, John, I thought I made it. I said, look, this all worked out. I went from feeling like a failure to feeling like a success overnight. Everything is going to be great from here. Fast forward a few years. I am 25, still working this job. I have a girlfriend who is a model. I just competed in and won a bodybuilding show, so I was quite literally in the best shape of my life. I had a sports car. We had a new apartment together. From the outside looking in, everything was amazing. And there's no way this person could possibly be unhappy or unfulfilled. But the truth is, I was very insecure. I was very uncertain. I was very misaligned. I wasn't passionate about anything. I didn't feel any purpose for life. And I was just a shell of myself, is usually how I explain it. One day, my girlfriend came to me and she said, Kev, I have these big goals, these big dreams, these big aspirations to move across the country from New Hampshire on the east coast of the US to California on the west coast of the US. And I want you to come with me. And in my insecurity, in my scarcity, in my fear, I gave her every reason in the world why she shouldn't do it. And she ended up choosing her goals over me, which is exactly what she should have done. And she left me. That was my initial rock bottom, where my bills doubled, work got slow, I'm living by myself, getting depressed, just kind of dealing with the struggles of being left behind. I convinced myself, John, that if I made a lot of money, that would fix most of my problems, even more money than I already made. So I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Over the next 12 months, I'm going to make as much money as humanly possible, and that's going to make me feel really good about myself. So I got a promotion at the beginning of the next year, which is great. That's in alignment with me working more. And then I proceeded to spend the next 10 months on the road living in hotels because most of our contracts were out of state. I would be gone Monday through Friday. I'd come home Friday night. I'd do my laundry Saturday. And then usually I'd leave again Sunday night to get to the hotel. So I got to the end of the year. I had my final pay stub in hand. I opened it up and I made $100,000 at 26 with no college degree. But I had another one of those moments where, yeah, I'm supposed to feel a certain way, but I don't. This didn't fix any of the internal stuff. The bank account looks good, but I don't feel good as a man. I realized that for most of my life, especially that year, I'd lived unconsciously. The opposite of unconscious is hyperconscious. So I started a podcast called the Hyperconscious Podcast. I fell in love with podcasting as I fell out of love with my job because I know the job success is not going to bring Kevin success. I don't want to do that again. I don't want to travel for 10 months. I don't want to sleep in these crusty hotel rooms. I don't want to do it.
When was that, Kevin?
That was 2017.
17, okay.
Yep, 2017. So I start calling out of work. I start leaving the job site early. I'm showing up late. You would not have hired me, my friend. I was not a good employee at the time. And it kept getting harder and harder for me to leave. Not liking your job is hard enough. Not liking your job and then getting in a work van and driving 6, 8, 12 hours to the job site to live there is a whole nother thing. So exactly. This all culminated in me waking up in a hotel room in New Jersey, which is 6 hours away from where I lived at the time. My alarm clock went off at 5:15, 5:30 in the morning, sat up, slid to the edge of the bed, and I was lacing up my work boots as I had done 1,000 times before. But that morning, it was like there was 10 televisions on in my head at the same time, and every single one was on a different station. And one is saying, you're stuck here forever. People like you don't get jobs like this. Never mind, leave them behind. If you do work up the courage to leave, what are your friends going to say? What's your family going to say? And if you do leave this job, what are we going to do? Because there was no plan B. We barely had a plan A. And that was the moment, John, where I thought to myself, if I take my life, I will take my problems with me. And I ended up reaching out to a friend who's now my business partner. He gave me many sage words of wisdom. And then I ended up leaving that job in 2018. Now here we are.
So, and then started your venture into more communicating, building self-confidence, and then sharing it with others.
Yeah.
And so now if I look at podcasting, you're immensely successful in the podcasting side, and all the other things that you do is you do a variety of other things that include public speaking. Where did you then find the confidence? What created it? The other friend that I was looking for his name now because, sorry, I didn't.
No worries. Alan.
Alan, yeah. So Alan obviously played a big role in kind of turning, the thing from go back or get out to saying, okay, let's start something new. And those were all really, communication and technology is so new, really. 2017, 18, 19, it was all at the beginning. Next came COVID, obviously didn't help either. And so during all that period, you build an entity behind you and a base that puts you where you are today.
Yeah. Well, it all started from a place of admitting that I wasn't confident. That was one of the hardest things in the world to say. I believe public speaking is the number 2 fear behind dying. And here I am hopping on a microphone all the time, talking to people who I don't know are listening. And one of the best things I did was I worked with Alan because he helped me borrow belief. And there's many examples of him doing that for me and then me being able to do that for other people. But it's just as simple as saying, okay, I know you're afraid and you're most likely afraid of all the uncertainties that could happen. Let me just help you here. I've already been through the cave. Let me just lead the way with a flashlight and I'll show you there's nothing bad's going to happen.
Right.
I'll show you that the monster in the closet is actually a pile of socks. You just haven't seen it yet. I've already seen it.
Right.
That was big for me.
Right.
And then the other thing was I used to have this habit called fear chasing, where every day I would have a flashcard and I would write down the number of fears I chased that day. So as an example, if I talked to you 5 years ago, that would have been a check mark. I went on that podcast today. I was outside of my comfort zone. Check. I did a coaching call today. Check. I sent a challenging message to a family member. Check. I was so focused on getting outside of my comfort zone that I actually did it too much to the point where I started having anxiety attacks.
Correct.
So I don't necessarily recommend doing it to the depth and to the level I did, but I tried to take as many small steps as humanly possible. I borrowed belief, or it was injected into me. And I tried to say, okay, based on what I did last week, based on the feelings I have today, what can I look at for the most recent and relevant proof to either disprove this fear or keep the momentum going?
Right.
And that has really, really helped me. That's one of the reasons I'm grateful we do as many episodes as we do, because I have a lot of proof that I can podcast. It's like, oh, yesterday I did it, and the day before I did it, and it went well.
Right.
So recent and relevant proof has been a very, very impactful, important way for me to actually build and maintain the confidence and self-belief.
So the podcasting, how many podcasts do you do? You do them hourly. How many do you do a week?
We do 7 a week.
7 a week.
7. Yeah. And it's usually 20 to 30 minutes.
Right.
And then I have another podcast about podcasts that I do 1 a week. So I'm doing at least 8 episodes a week.
So if I look at podcasting, for me, relatively new, just a little bit of background. I don't know how much of my bio you have seen, but I'm a little bit older than you. Likely, I'm turning 83 November the 1st. We have a lot in common. That I was born in Holland, northeastern Holland, in 1940. During the Second World War, especially in our area, we were invaded by the German Blitzkrieg in 1940. My mom had 3 kids. Obviously, I was born November the 1st into the war already. Sister 1 year older, brother 2 years older. And my dad was drafted into the Dutch army. And the last time they heard from him was when Rotterdam was bombed in April of 1945. We did not know if he had died or was alive until after the war, 5 years later. So we went through a very, very tough time. It was difficult growing up. The winter 1944 and 1945 was called the Hunger Winter, the coldest winter on record in that area. We had to go out daily with gunny sacks, find food, something to eat, something to heat and eat, on a daily basis. And we would go in the railroad yards. The reason we wanted with gunny sacks is that the Germans wouldn't shoot us. They would just put us one in the back and then we'll be back tomorrow. So still in my mind, and then I remember from 1943 forward that overhead we were the bombers bombing Germany, seeing up to 100, 200, 300 bombers in the air. and and that sound still is with me, even today. Still, the feeling of hunger, I can still feel that today, and the feeling of cold, is still with me. And then obviously we were liberated by the Canadians April the 12th, 1945, and and we saw far too much then. Where people were shot, dead bodies, and all those things that go with terrible war. And but I got so impressed by the Canadian Army that liberated us that I always knew from that point forward I would go to Canada. And I wanted to go initially when I was 17, but my parents wouldn't let me. And then I was drafted in the Dutch Air Force for 2 years. And then finally I went when I was 24. The other part about me, some similarities with you likely, is that I was not a good student. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. And then they said, what are we going to do with this guy? And my parents were very supportive, and they said, well, should we send him to the mentally challenged school, or should we make him get him a trade? So they got me a job as a furniture maker in a furniture factory, and at 14. And then after I came out of the Air Force, and which was quite a training for me, I was still had issues with that I had failed, because most people around me had educations. And in Holland, the way it was that you want a job and saying, okay, well, how many diplomas do you have? Well, I didn't have any, so then I had, my dad worked or managed a small lumber mill, and I loved lumber. My grandfather was a master carpenter, and I loved that part of what he did. And so my dream was to go to Canada and build my own lumber mill, just to prove to myself that I could do it, and get past that feeling of failure. So I left Holland in 1965 with one suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, $150. And want to where most of the timber is in Canada, is in Western Canada, in British Columbia. And fortunately, I came off the train in Vancouver, couldn't speak language, didn't have a job, didn't know a soul, and went to the immigration department, talked to a German fella, told I could speak some German, not English, talked to him about what I wanted to do. My dream was to build a lumber mill. He said, Prince George. Go to Prince George. That's where they're building the mills and the pulp mills. That's where the future is. So I went on the bus, 12 hours on the bus with my suitcase, 2 sets of clothes and my 3 books. Went to Prince George. When I came off the bus, about a block and a half away from where I'm sitting now, I had in my pocket, my employees gave me this, 2547. And I right underneath it, my foundation is attitude, avoid the negative, passion, find something you love to do, and then work ethic, and then what will follow is success. And I still follow that today. And so started from being a cleanup man, and then within a year and a half I was a superintendent, and then within 2 years I was part shareholder in a little sawmill in Watson Lake, Yukon, of all places. That's a place where it snows in July. You don't know if it is late or early. And started there, came back to Prince George, and then started my operation here, with 3 people and a lumber mill from the ground up. That's now my base company, the Brink Forest Products, but still, even then, at that age, I still felt I had been a failure, and everybody said, "Oh, you're successful," and all of those kind of things. I didn't feel that way. I felt I had been a failure, even then still, and even when the company built up. It was not until, in my case, two things happened, Kevin, and that's why I'm mentioning it to you like that, is because that we have similarities. The greatest fear that I had is public speaking or speaking to people. And I was well aware of the fact, in my case it applied. People fear public speaking more, not second to, more than death in a lot of cases. And so by pure coincidence, I could interact in my own organization with 2 or 3 people, but if it got beyond that, I really couldn't. And somebody dragged me to an organization by pure coincidence. It's called Toastmasters. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yep.
And so for our guests that are listening, I give them a picture of Toastmasters. Probably 450,000 people are in Toastmaster clubs around the world. And there are several of them here in Canada and especially in the United States. And it deals with giving confidence first and foremost, becoming a better speaker, but what is more important, even becoming a better listener. And I was a Toastmaster. The first meeting that I went to, I said, "No, I'm not going." He said, "Well, you should come." And I said, "But what's going to happen? You're going to ask me questions?" "No, you're not going to ask us. You just sit there and you listen." I said, "Okay." And so I sit there, and halfway through the meeting, so somebody looked at me and said, "Hey, John, tell us a little bit about yourself." And I said, "Oh my God, So anyway, so I said to my ex-sister-in-law, "I'll never go back here. I'm done." And so, but I did go back the following week. And I stayed in Toastmasters from 1990 till 2000. And again, a picture behind Toastmasters more, not only about speaking, it's about listening. It's about a lot of other things, and thinking on your feet and being able to interact and give confidence to who you are. So to me, it's always something that I talk about if I have an opportunity to do that. And so I became a Toastmaster. There's probably around the world 3 to 5 million people that have had exposure to Toastmasters. For me, I gave it all that I got, as I do with most things, and I became a distinguished Toastmaster. That's the highest level in Toastmasters. And and of all the Toastmaster people that have been part of Toastmaster, less than 1% goes to the level of becoming a distinguished Toastmaster. But it changed my life. The other thing that changed my life, from feeling to be a failure, even at the point where I had a lumber company, I was successful in the eyes of everybody else. He said, "Oh, you're so successful." No, I didn't feel that. I felt I had been a failure, and still was, until something happened to me. I walked into a bookstore, and I'm going to show you, talk about a book, and for some reason or another, I pick up this book, Driven to Distraction. It was about ADHD. And I said, "Oh my God, now finally I know who I am." And I wrote in the book, in Dutch I did, because I was ashamed of it, because it was implied to be a mental issue, a problem. And I wrote in there, "Now I finally know who I am." And that was in 1997. It took me 5 years before I even talked to my own doctor that delivered my 2 daughters, was a friend, that I even said to him, I came into his office one day and he said, "Hey, John, why are you here?" I said, "I think I got ADHD." And so we looked at it and we concluded, yeah, I do. And then it took me up to probably about 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago that I had an obligation, I thought, to talk about it more. And I included it in my speeches and presentations that I did. I'm also a professional speaker, amazingly. That for somebody that and it clicks with you, I'm sure.
Of course.
Now, the other part that I felt was important, and I don't want to necessarily talk about how successful I am as a company man, but be quite successful. And so, but I had to talk about that as well. Is that so? I wrote. I thought about writing a book about it, and a lot of people said to me, "Why don't you write a book about it?" So it took me. I did write a book about it, and I call it "Against All Odds." And it took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it. I had never written a book in my life, and obviously I was my education formal. But the other one part is more important, obviously, the not so formal. But my native tongue is Dutch, but I grew up in northeastern Holland, which is a dialect, not even closely resembling Dutch. That was my base, so I had to come from there to Dutch to then acquire the skills of the English language, and then to write a book is a whole different thing. So this book is, I knew I had to do it well. It's a biography. It's not something that you say, you write it and then say, I don't think it's the right one, I'm going to do another one. You got one chance to do it. So this one is not about hoorah, hoorah, John, how successful he is. It's just the opposite. As to falling down, standing up, and being desperate, sometimes with all the good, the bad, and the ugly, drinking too much, have anxiety issues, being on Xanax, addiction, and on and on and on, all the other things that go with it. And so that's what I wrote about, Against All Odds. And then the other thing that I felt is that the more I became vocal about it, that I felt I had to share some, not the successes, but the challenges and how to deal with them with other people. I felt I had to write about ADHD. And I wrote a book about it, came out about a couple of years ago, ADHD Unlocked. And I call it a superpower because it allows me not so much formal education where we spend a whole lot of time sitting in the classroom for 4 years talking about things that are totally not of interest to me. I'm focusing on things that I want to focus on. And so this book, again, quite successful actually. It's audio and on all the major media. I wrote it as from an ADHD perspective. If it is just going on and on and on, people lose interest. So you can open this book anywhere and start and do the other part. So this one I wrote, and then now I'm on a run. So another one that just came out about a week ago, 2 weeks ago actually, is about the same thing that you were talking about. I find so many people that are trying to, that do not have that passion in what they do, and it's so critically important to your life, because if it isn't, you go around in a circle, and precisely what you were talking about, I was in the same boat. So finding your passion and saying, okay, John, did you find your passion? I am, very much so. All the time, still now. And so I wrote a book about it, Finding Your Passion, Living the Dream. And the amazing part about it is, Kevin, is that I heard something on U.S. somewhere comments is that, and the same applies, I believe, in Canada and other places. 70% of the people that work do not like their jobs. And 75% of them are looking for another job. And I felt I had to talk about that in this book. And, so there kind of, where am I today is that I have successful businesses, but I love the podcasting. I started it about year and a half by coincidence before COVID, with one of the local television stations talking about the forest industry primarily, half-hour segments, and then came COVID. I owned this apartment here. And we said to my team, what are we going to do now? And saying, well, maybe we should do podcasting. So we started podcasting. And then we built the studio around it, good equipment, good cameras, and so that was about 3-4 years ago, and then I kind of give it all that I got, and I do about 3 a week, and now we are at the point, and talking to an expert, obviously, being you, is saying that where we are now, we're quite successful. The podcasts are very successful. We are obviously getting more and more virtual in addition to the ones that we have. And we are now to the point as to what I do. I'm entrepreneurial, obviously, and saying, where do we go from here? So I'm a professional speaker. The other part that you may find interesting is that gone through a period in my life where, and other people have gone through, where I got a case of diverticulitis in 2008. It nearly killed me, and and I knew from that point in I had to change my life. I was not serious enough about health, physical, mental, obviously, and I went to the gym, and I got a trainer, and I started training, and after I was overweight, very conscientious, because gyms are intimidating people. You have all these beautiful persons there, and then me walking in there. I don't even know how to sit on a machine. So anyway, once I got past that and became serious about it, I knew that was an important part of my life. Then somebody said one day to me, have you ever thought about competing? I said, me? Yeah. and so then I started working towards that. So I started bodybuilding. And so it became on the regional area, second in bodybuilding, third in physique, qualified me for the provincials, came third in bodybuilding, second in physique, qualified me for the nationals and the Arnolds. And so 2018, 2019, then COVID came, and now at 83, I'm again training I want to get back to the nationals and the Arnolds. And hopefully that will happen in 24 when I'm 84, which makes me the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America.
My goodness.
So
my goodness, John.
So there you have me.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Let me flip the script. What were the 3 books you had? You said you had 3 books in your backpack with you. What were the 3 books that you had?
Oh, interesting that you say that. So the one was Management by Drucker, right, and in Dutch, and then the other one was Logical Thinking in Dutch, and the other one was about Canada. So those were the 3 books.
Right on.
Then,
what a story.
Yeah, and then when I came off the bus here with my $25.47, I had to find a job. It was on a Thursday, and so right here, so I went to the immigration office here, and fortunately there was a young fellow that had a Dutch background, so and he was going to help me find a job. So I found a job about 70 miles south of here, piling lumber, and I thought I'll just take the bus, right? Walk to the highway, but there is no buses. They only go 4 hours or twice a day or whatever. So I hitchhiked with my raincoat, black double-breasted jacket, gray pants, black shoes, tie, vest. And so then somebody that picked me up on the highway must have thought, this guy is crazy, with his suitcase and his suit. And then I could speak English, so he said, where do you want to go? And I could say yes or no. I said Greyhound in the next city down. And so he dropped me off at the Greyhound. The personnel manager of that particular mill came down to the Greyhound and then gave me a job that same night. It took me 30 years to find Ernie McKettrick, to come back to see him and thank him for helping me, finding me a place for board and room. That evening, I was piling lumber in the sawmill in my gray pants, double-breasted jacket, my tie, and there were about plywood plant in the sawmill. There were about 300 people working there. Every single one came down. You must see this crazy guy piling lumber and with his And I say, by the first coffee break, I took off my tie. But what they did not realize, a lot of people, is that I had a purpose. I was there for me to prove that I could do it to me. That to build from nothing up to, to being, at least in my mind, successful. And then once I reached that, I had the confidence, then I believe I have an obligation to give back. And that is the books, for one, speaking in public, very, very active in the community. That's part of my culture. And then the other one is to, write the books and, and help wherever I can on issues that are important to me. And that is, trauma to a certain extent for a lot of people, ADHD to a lot of people, but finding confidence and saying, you are special in your own way. I don't care. Just give it all you got, believe in yourself, avoid negative attitude, passion, work ethic. As you said, like I usually wake up even now at 5:30 in the morning. I always think I'm late. I always make my bed, and then I'm in a hurry. And then, and so that's what I do. Even now at 83, a lot of the guys around me say, they say, I don't know how he does it, but, fortunately, I have the help. The other book that I'm writing, I just have to say this to you, and you may find this interesting. I'm writing one more book that is coming out next June, and that book is called Living Young, Dying Old, because I'm going to be 120. That's what I'm planning. So I'm going to make sure that I take care of my body, understand my body, and then stay active mentally, physically, so I'm working on that book right now, and it's very exciting.
It's amazing. It's amazing. You embody what a lot of the qualities that I aspire to have: health, wealth, and love. That's what I'm playing for. Health, wealth, and love. That's what success is to me.
I agree.
Just being able to do what you love with the people you love in a body that you love and is strong and capable. So very inspirational, John.
But I find, Kevin, is that what I found in the podcasting, and I'm still newer in it than you are, but I find it exciting to interact with people from around the world. And just today, I believe it was yesterday, we had a podcast with a lady from Denver, Colorado, and and just amazing, and so I find it really, really inspiring for me, and at the same time seeing this success that we have around our podcast, because I keep it interesting, not on one topic, but right across the board. And so my question to you likely is that, where do we go from here?
Where do you go?
Yeah, in saying, and where do you go? Because that's an inspiration to me, because there you are, you have this successful foundation, you have the history behind it, you've been there, you've done it, and you can share and feel you have an obligation to share with others. Now you have this amazing platform, of podcasting that takes you to all the media around the world, which is still it's still at the beginning. That is still very much. So where does it go from here? Where can we be, you and me, be more part of it, and where do we build it from here?
Yeah, I would say taking what you're doing and make sure you're sending it out to all the other like social media platforms and that type of stuff is a great way to get more eyes on what you're doing here. Right. So what I've learned is usually the podcast is just a small piece in a much larger mechanism. And a lot of people think, well, I'll record an episode and that's going to be it. And there's just so much more that goes into it. And it's just a massive thing. I can tell you our goal is to be the most successful holistic self-improvement podcast and brand in the world. That's what we're playing for long term. And it's very clear that you're playing for large amounts of impact as well. Yeah,
exactly. That.
Yeah, of course. And it's very clear. I resonate with that very highly. Are you doing, so you're doing speaking, you're doing the podcast, you go on a lot of other podcasts, I'm guessing?
Yeah.
That's
More
a
and
big thing
more
for
all
you.
the time, Kevin. Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be a big thing for you because you have such an amazing story
Right.
that will resonate with so many people. It'll inspire so many people. The future, to your point, is going to be very virtual. And I expect that in the next 10, 15 years, we're going to be having headsets on and everything we do is going to be virtual. And this podcast is going to be in your head and you're going to feel like you're in the studio with John. I think we're going very virtual. The technology is speeding up at an exponential rate. It's getting cheaper at an exponential rate. A lot of things that are not possible right now are going to be possible in the next 10 to 15 years. And a lot of things that are extremely uncomfortable in terms of advancements are probably going to be very normal in the next 10 to 15 years.
I agree with you 100%. And all we have to do is look back not all that long ago and seeing what all has changed. You know,
Yeah.
I remember well that when I first came here, I just sent a telegram to my parents and saying, I'm okay, stop, the this and that, and send me some money, stop, and that was about it. And now you pick up that cell phone that wasn't all that long ago, was the size of a shoe. My whole computer system. So everything is happening. So for an old guy in particular, and I don't feel like an old guy, but I have friends not even my age, and they say, no, I don't do emails. Are you kidding me? So the key for me is now trying to keep up with all the things that are happening. But even sitting here, not all that long ago, I was contemplating I should have a studio in Vancouver so that my circle gets bigger. And then said, maybe we should do virtual. I wonder how that would work. Well, it works perfect because as you and me are sitting here, you could well be sitting next to me. Normally I sit here, interview the person here, but it is just as comfortable for me as it appears to be for you of sitting here across from each other.
Yeah, it's easier, it's more sustainable, it's more efficient, it's more affordable. We had a really nice studio that we got right when COVID started. And it got to the point where we said, it's taken me an hour to get there. It's taken my business partner an hour. That's 2 man-hours per trip. I can't coach if I'm in the car. So yeah, I have a studio at my house. So I have pajamas on from the lower half. This is pretty much how I live my life at this point.
Perfect. I love it. So that then being said, the people that you podcast we contacted each other from, so we became a member of the, how do you call it, Podmatch? Podmatch. That is a very broad grouping of people can interact with each other, right?
Yeah, Podmatch is a great platform. You can literally, it's kind of a dating app for podcasters.
Right.
So if you're looking for a business person, you just type business and everybody that qualifies as a business podcaster or podcast guest would pop up. Yeah, it makes things like this very, very, very easy and very accessible.
So are you using that a lot for finding future contacts?
So we actually at this point don't have guests anymore.
Okay.
So we used to have, we've had some really big successful entrepreneurs and speakers and coaches and authors. And then we got to the point where we said, you know what, we're just going to do solo episodes from here on out. So we've been doing a lot of solo episodes. What we use it for is to get on other shows so we can spread the message, the impact, the mission. So yeah, I'm going on, over the last 2 years, I've probably gone on 650 other shows. And that's the vast majority of why we use that platform, yes.
Okay, and so that is a platform that works for you. You kind of developed it, and I looked at some of your background to your bio. Is that that is part of the Next Level University that deals with a number of topics in regards to communications, entrepreneurship, other areas that are of interest to people.
Yeah. Next Level U really got created from the place of, I believe if I had self-improvement in my life at an earlier age, I probably would have avoided a lot of the pain that I experienced. I never understood the value of self-improvement. It seemed hokey. It seemed weird. And then when I started working on myself and I started becoming more confident and more self-aware, that's when it really locked in. And I believe if more people were self-aware and more people had access to free self-improvement, I think the world would be a different place. It would be a more aligned place. So that is our mission in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100% with the same ideas and concepts, is to find that confidence as to who you are and what you can be. And then the other part is, are you doing books at all, or have you ever
Not yet.
contemplated that?
And my business partner reminds me a lot of you. He wants to live to 120. That's his, he doesn't want to, that's his plan. That is his intention. So I resonate with that a lot.
I love it.
Right?
Yeah.
You guys would get along really well. But at some point, I'll probably write a book. For me, it's probably going to be about podcasting. I'm very, very passionate about 5 things, really. Podcasting is one of them. Self-improvement is one of them. Alan will probably do most of the self-improvement books. I'll probably do the podcast stuff.
Right. Yeah. So for me, it's in terms of going forward, is I like the books. I have 2 on the go for next year, and then we'll likely continue in some form. I love the podcasting, and then I love the public speaking in all kinds of places all around the world. Actually, but it's always the same. And I'm sure you feel the same. You have to have the foundation.
Yeah.
And have gone through the difficult times like you were at an early age in the mid-20s, where you say you were making a difficult decision, end it all or build it from here. And obviously your partner played a big role in turning this around, and but it gave you experience that other people do not have. And I, to a certain extent, in different ways, feel like that is a benefit that I've had, and it's something I can share with others. And at the end of the day, what is important to me is that saying that you're, in a general sense, are special. Think of yourself as special. Not special compared to others, but you are, and share with others wherever that is possible. Be kind, be understanding, be respectful, work hard, give back to the community wherever you can. All those kind of values are very rewarding to me. And then obviously I'm also an entrepreneur, building a business and maintaining a business, right?
Your uniqueness is a superpower.
Right.
You have a very unique story, and there's a lot of adversity. I might have a unique story with adversity. Your uniqueness is a superpower, and if harnessed correctly, I do believe that your adversity is your advantage.
Correct.
It's you've been through a lot. It's probably a little bit, I don't want to say easier, but you getting up out of bed in the morning in a warm environment, in a nice bed, I'm assuming, in a nice place, going to get a warm breakfast, there's probably a lot less resistance for you because you've experienced a lot of adversity around that. So I do believe it's your advantage. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I can only imagine.
Yeah. So, but I'm sensitive to your timeline. So, so in closing, give me some feedback as to what you heard, what I'm doing. Give me some advice in terms of saying, okay, as you go forward, and you already did some of that, but just kind of in closing. Because you must think, there all of a sudden at 9 o'clock you do a podcast and you do many other ones and wonder what this guy is all about, kind of a thing. And then all of a sudden, as I do with some of them, and saying, wow, and that was a good one.
Yeah, so I think you're probably ahead of where you think you are. You're very clearly very aspirational, and you have a ton of ambition around impact and the mission. I would have to do more research on what you're actually doing. But what I would say, and this is what I always tell people, is 2 things if you want to grow your podcast. 1, treat it like a business, not a hobby, not a fun thing. It's a business. It is at the end of the day because it requires business time. And figure out the most important uses of your time. So for me, I'm either on the mic podcasting, I am on the mic speaking, or I'm on the mic coaching. I spend a lot of time in front of the microphone. That, and then for you, I would say figure out the most aligned ways to create virtual communities from the podcast. There could be neighbors that listen to the show, but neither of them are going to know the other person listens to the show unless we create a community for them to come and meet. So if there's not a community aspect yet, that's a really big place to go. Facebook group, LinkedIn group, whatever it may be, live meetups in person. Virtual is always going to be valuable, but the more common virtual gets, the more valuable in person is going to get. So setting stuff up like that too is always going to be helpful.
Excellent, Kevin. An amazing podcast. I anticipated something like it, but you never quite realize until you see it. So what I'll be going to do, I don't know if Scott has done that, but we'll send you the books.
Sure, I appreciate it.
And then at the same time, watch us on podcasting. I want to stay in touch with you because we have a lot of things in common. And, and again, for all those people that are watching us from around the world, the Next Level University, what is the best level to get contact with you other than maybe you just want to leave that with us so that the people that are listening can contact you if they so wish?
Yeah, I always suggest my email. My email is kevin@nextleveluniverse.com. Questions, comments, concerns. I do my own emails. John, you'd be proud. I do my own emails. So I'm always there for you. And then, check out the podcast as well.
Excellent. Kevin, it was my pleasure.
Likewise, my friend.
Okay, stay in touch. Take care.
Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.